Chapter 13 of Memoir of Jane Austen. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Memoir of Jane Austen by James Edward Austen Lee. Chapter 13. The Last Work. Jane Austen was taken from us. How much unexhausted talent perished with her, how largely she might yet have contributed to the entertainment of her readers, if her life had been prolonged, cannot be known; but it is certain that the mine at which she had so long laboured was not worked out, and that she was still diligently employed in collecting fresh materials from it. Persuasion had been finished in August 1816; some time was probably given to correcting it for the press, but on the 27th of the following January, according to the date on her own manuscript, she began a new novel, and worked at it up to the 17th of March. The chief part of this manuscript is written in her usual firm and neat hand, but some of the latter pages seem to have been first traced in pencil, probably when she was too weak to sit long at her desk, and written over in ink afterwards. The quantity produced does not indicate any decline of power or industry, for in those 7 weeks 12 chapters had been completed. It is more difficult to judge of the quality of a work so little advanced. It had received no name; there was scarcely any indication what the course of the story was to be, nor was any heroine yet perceptible, who, like Fanny Price or Anne Elliot, might draw round her the sympathies of the reader. Such an unfinished fragment cannot be presented to the public, but I am persuaded that some of Jane Austen's admirers will be glad to learn something about the latest creations which were forming themselves in her mind, and therefore, as some of the principal characters were already sketched in with a vigorous hand, I will try to give an idea of them, illustrated by extracts from the work. The scene is laid at Sanditon, a village on the Sussex coast, just struggling into notoriety as a bathing place, under the patronage of the two principal proprietors of the parish, Mr. Parker and Lady Denham. Mr. Parker was an amiable man, with more enthusiasm than judgment, whose somewhat shallow mind overflowed with the one idea of the prosperity of Sanditon, together with a jealous contempt of the rival village of Brinshaw, where a similar attempt was going on. To the regret of his much enduring wife, he had left his family mansion, with all of its ancestral comforts of gardens, shrubberies, and shelter, situated in a valley some miles inland, and had built a new residence, a Trafalgar House, on the bare brow of the hill overlooking Sanditon, and the sea, exposed to every wind that blows; but he will confess to no discomforts, nor suffer his family to feel any from the change. The following extract brings him before the reader, mounted on his hobby. He wanted to secure the promise of a visit, and to get as many of the family as his own house would hold to follow him to Sanditon as soon as possible, and, healthy as all the Heywoods undeniably were, he foresaw that every one of them would be benefited by the sea. He held it indeed as certain that no person, however upheld for the present by fortuitous aids of exercise and spirit in a semblance of health, could be really in a state of secure and permanent health without spending at least 6 weeks by the sea every year. The sea air and sea bathing together were nearly infallible, one or the other of them being a match for every disorder of the stomach, the lungs, or the blood. They were antispasmodic, antipulmonary, antibilious, and antirheumatic. Nobody could catch cold by the sea; nobody wanted appetite by the sea; nobody wanted spirits; nobody wanted strength. They were healing, softening, relaxing, fortifying, and bracing, seemingly just as was wanted, sometimes one, sometimes the other. If the sea breeze failed, the sea bath was the certain corrective, and when bathing disagreed, the sea breeze was evidently designed by nature for the cure. His eloquence, however, could not prevail. Mr. and Mrs. Heywood never left home. The maintenance, education, and fitting out of 14 children demanded a very quiet, settled, careful course of life, and obliged them to be stationary and healthy at Willingdon. What prudence had first enjoined was now rendered pleasant by habit. They never left home, and they had a gratification in saying so. Lady Denham's was a very different character. She was a rich, vulgar widow, with a sharp but narrow mind, who cared for the prosperity of Sanditon only so far as it might increase the value of her own property. She is thus described: Lady Denham had been a rich Miss Brereton, born to wealth, but not to education. Her first husband had been a Mr. Hollis, a man of considerable property in the country, of which a large share of the parish of Sanditon, with manor and mansion house, formed a part. He had been an elderly man when she married him, her own age about 30. Her motives for such a match could be little understood at the distance of 40 years, but she had so well nursed and pleased Mr. Hollis that at his death he left her everything, all his estates, and all at her disposal. After a widowhood of some years she had been induced to marry again. The late Sir Harry Denham, of Denham Park, in the neighbourhood of Sanditon, succeeded in removing her and her large income to his own domains, but he could not succeed in the views of permanently enriching his family which were attributed to him. She had been too wary to put anything out of her own power, and when, on Sir Harry's death, she returned again to her own house at Sanditon, she was said to have made this boast, that though she had got nothing but her title from the family, yet she had given nothing for it. For the title it was to be supposed that she married. Lady Denham was indeed a great lady, beyond the common wants of society, for she had many thousands a year to bequeath, and 3 distinct sets of people to be courted by: her own relations, who might very reasonably wish for her original £30 among them; the legal heirs of Mr. Hollis, who might hope to be more indebted to her sense of justice than he had allowed them to be to his; and those members of the Denham family for whom her second husband had hoped to make a good bargain. By all these, or by branches of them, she had no doubt been long and still continued to be well attacked; and of these 3 divisions Mr. Parker did not hesitate to say that Mr. Hollis's kindred were the least in favour, and Sir Henry Denham's the most. The former, he believed, had done themselves irremediable harm by expressions of very unwise resentment at the time of Mr. Hollis's death. The latter, to the advantage of being the remnant of a connection which she had certainly valued, joined those of having been known to her from their childhood, and of being always at hand to pursue their interests by seasonable attentions. But another claimant was now to be taken into account, a young female relation whom Lady Denham had been induced to receive into her family. After having always protested against any such addition, and often enjoyed the repeated defeat she had given to every attempt of her own relations to introduce this young lady or that young lady as a companion at Sanditon House, she had brought back with her from London last Michaelmas a Miss Clara Brereton, who bid fair to vie in favour with Sir Edward Denham, and to secure for herself and her family that share of the accumulated property which they certainly had the best right to inherit. Lady Denham's character comes out in a conversation which takes place at Mr. Parker's tea-table. The conversation turned entirely upon Sanditon, its present number of visitants, and the chances of a good season. It was evident that Lady Denham had more anxiety, more fears of loss than her coadjutor. She wanted to have the place fill faster, and seemed to have many harassing apprehensions of the lodgings being in some instances underlet. To report that a large boarding school was expected, she replies, "Ah, well, no harm in that. They will stay there 6 weeks, and out of such a number who knows but some may be consumptive, and want asses' milk, and I have 2 milch asses at this very time. But perhaps the little misses may hurt the furniture. I hope they will have a good sharp governess to look after them." But she wholly disapproved of Mr. Parker's wish to secure the residence of a medical man amongst them. "Why, what should we do with a doctor here? It would only be encouraging our servants and the poor to fancy themselves ill, if there was a doctor at hand. Oh, pray let us have none of that tribe at Sanditon. We go on very well as we are. There is the sea, and the downs, and my milch asses, and I have told Mrs. Whitby that if anybody inquires for a chamber horse, they may be supplied at a fair rate. Poor Mr. Hollis's chamber horse, as good as new, and what can people want more? I have lived 70 years in the world, and never took physic, except twice, and never saw the face of a doctor in all my life on my own account, and I really believe if my poor dear Sir Harry had never seen one neither, he would have been alive now. 10 fees, one after another, did the men take who sent him out of the world. I beseech you, Mr. Parker, no doctors here." This lady's character comes out more strongly in a conversation with Mr. Parker's guest, Miss Charlotte Haywood. Sir Edward Denham, with his sister Esther and Clara Brereton, have just left them. Charlotte accepted an invitation from Lady Denham to remain with her on the terrace, while the others adjourned to the library. Lady Denham, like a true great lady, talked, and talked only of her own concerns, and Charlotte listened. taking hold of Charlotte's arm with the ease of one who felt that